Today's program description, Black Friday/Cyber Monday, make returns variance processing go away, is as follows. It is fast approaching the fourth quarter, well known by supplier and manufacturer AR departments as the worst time of the year. Along with skyrocketing sales on Black Friday and Cyber Monday brings astronomical levels of returned goods. And with that, retailers inevitably take back revenue on returns via whatever automated process they employ. Our heroes, the good people of AR, must slog through mountains of data to determine if the retailers returned a proper amount of items at the right price. And our long-suffering AR folks must utilize the retailer's systems to dispute these returns, sometimes only one by one. It doesn't have to be this way. Let iNymbus show you how to calculate returns variances automatically and dispute thousands of returns in minutes and save the holidays. Presenting today's program is Rohit Patel, Credit and Collections Consultant at ResMed. Rohit Patel has extensive experience in the credit and collections arena and long tenures leading the credit and collections teams at Sony Computer Entertainment America, Warner Brothers, Home Entertainment, and ResMed. At these companies, Rohit's expertise includes the development of strategic plans that led to improved financial operating results and successful global ERP implementations, as well as other process and system enhancements that led to increased efficiencies. Rohit believes that technology will play a critical role in the future of credit and collections and is always looking for cutting-edge technology that disturbs the norm. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn the program over to Rohit.
Thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. And I'm just going to go to the next slide. I just want to make sure my computer is working. All right, you go to the next slide. All right. Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the time. And just a quick high-level overview of the agenda. We'll be going through what is return variance analysis and a case study of a customer of iNymbus and how they were able to use bots, which is the third bullet down in here, to really help the accounts receivable team, the deductions team, and what's next for potential people on the phone as well. 'Tis the season, as most of you are probably getting prepared for Halloween next week. Shortly thereafter, you'll have Thanksgiving, and just over 60 days, believe it or not, Christmas will be here before you know it. Now, this elf doesn't look too jolly, but the question is, right before Christmas, returns are going to be heavy as well as shortly after Christmas. And if you're not ready, we should get you ready. So why is the elf so grumpy? Well, as you can see, year over year, it is predicted that there's going to be a 20% increase by Cyber Monday this coming year. So if you look at the numbers now, not sure what percentage of your product comes back for returns, but if it's 20% over Cyber Monday and then the regular retailers, it could definitely add more time to your and your team's efforts. And also note that increasingly year over year, online retailers and the returns policy, it's easier for consumers to return product to you. I'm sure some of you or most of you probably use Amazon, and if you don't like the product, you return it immediately. And so the returns process is much easier for the consumer. Now, how consumers will handle the post holiday returns, right? So typically what we've seen is that 58% of majority of the buyers will return their product within the first month, right? So whether they like it or not. So depending upon your selling cycle and how the peaks and valleys of the upcoming season, expect that a high percentage of your returns would come back within the first month. You can see from the graph, a month after it does taper off, and then beyond that, typically consumers don't want to return that product. Now, in line with this, just want to make sure that are your staff ready for the holidays? I know it's always very, very hard to staff people up. Want to give them the time during the holidays with family and so forth. But this is a pretty indicative of what consumers are doing and how you should expect returns to come back to your warehouses. Just wanted to share with you just a high-level overview of the product supply chain. I'm sure most of you guys know what it looks like, but this is an example of forward logistics, right? So we as suppliers, you want to make sure that the product arrives to the shelves of the distributors, of the retailers, so that the consumer can buy that, right? You want to make sure it's boxed correctly. You want to make sure it's delivered in a timely manner, and it's there so that you do make that sale, right? So there is information flow on what I call the forward logistics, right? So it's going back and forth. Certain key things you want to make sure that you build it correctly, so you have fewer chargebacks, and then the quantity is correct, whether it's freight, taxes, and so forth. So product flows to the consumer. Once the consumer pays for it, you in turn should get that money flow back. So we do everything to make that transaction as clean as possible. Now, on the reverse side, logistics, right? Typically, you have your warehouses or your retailers wanting to get that product off of their shelves, if it's not moving, back through their warehouse and back in your hands, right? So on the previous slide, everything was nice and clean. On the reverse logistics, they just don't want to carry. They don't want to have that carrying cost of inventory. So they may just put it in a box. It's not neatly stacked. It's not neatly packed. They will request an RMA from you. They will box it and get it back to you. Now, along the way, along the journey, when it comes back, who knows whether there's missing pieces, whether they send the wrong product. And often, if you have a continual product that's going into them, is the pricing correct? And as a result of them not wanting to keep onto that product, there are handling fees, shipping fees, maybe there are discounts. Sometimes they may return wrong product on the wrong RMA. Often there may be product coming back to you on an RMA. So the forward logistics side is very, very clean. However, on the reverse logistics side, they want it off of their shelves, off of their warehouses, and back to you as quickly as possible. And they don't spend the time that we do on forward logistics as well. Now, at a high level, what is a returns variance analysis, right? I know the flowchart looks complicated. Is it easy to explain? Yes, but there's a lot of steps associated with it. Typically, you have an RMA, you issue it to the retailer, they will send that back to you. Your team now has the effort of matching those RMAs, crediting the invoice, looking for quantity pricing differences, right? So some of you may have fully automated spreadsheets that do this, but there is a lot of time and effort that's needed just to recoup the variance associated with a return. Now, the biggest part of that flowchart is the research process, right? So often you are going to have to go into the retailer site, pull the information from the RMA, what was returned back to you, match it up against your RMA in your ERP system, tracking data, whether it's from the carrier or from your warehouse, pricing data from pricing tables to make sure that you are crediting the correct amount, whether it's FIFO or LIFO, or however, whatever methodology you have. Now, you have to pull all this data, match it from different systems. You have to find the discrepancy. and whose fault it is, right? So they're going to tell you that they pack their returns perfectly, but just through my years in the industry, it's never perfect. It does come back messy. Then you have to, the burden is on you, although they may be in error, is to go ahead and prove what that dispute is, upload it into their system, and then wait for them to get back to you. So there is a huge effort on the research side. Now, what types of return variances do we have, right? So it varies, excuse me, on the returns process, whether it's one-to-one return, many-to-one, one-to-many. So it does vary. Now, often retailers are going to ask you to try and consolidate that information because product returned on a blanket RMA, as I call it, can happen over a period of time, whether it's over 3 months, 2 months, or a month. They do quarterly reconciliations, right? So you're going to have to gather that data. It can get messy. You can organize it, but there's a lot of money that is left on the table across there, which every penny you collect back will go to your company's bottom line. Now, how much is at stake, do you ask yourself? Well, not really sure, because it can add up, right? But this is just a simple example of a return variance. It's a $1,500 return variance, similar credit, but it's just shy of $40. Now, $40 can add up, right? If you have thousands of transactions coming back over a year, that can add up and easily pay for several analysts, right? So if you're able to collect that money back to help you do that. So there's a balance between how much time you spend on the returns and whether you have auto thresholds. But there is a lot at stake because, as you saw earlier on, often 20% or 50-odd% of returns that come back, you're going to have to deal with a discrepancy because, like I mentioned earlier on, it's not as clean on the reverse logistics side. So, not so easy to do, right? Most companies, have some, like I mentioned earlier on, rudimentary form of automation, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet, whether they write macros, but there's a lot of data that comes in there, right? And if they're doing quarterly reconciliations, there's a lot of validation, whether the pricing is correct or not, or whether there's inclusions, whether this should have been returned or not, whether it's your product or not your product. It can get complicated. Now, with the holidays, the volumes definitely increase because, like most of us, we want to take advantage of those 3 months, starting with Halloween, Thanksgiving, got the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then Christmas, right, coming through there. And so there is a peak that you'll start to see through the holidays. So that's just a little bit about returns, how they come back. It is a complex process. It's not that easy, and it can be cyclical as well. Now, here's a true life case study. I know we said a very large distributor. They do process hundreds of thousands of returns from a variety of retailers, right? So as a distributor, they're in the middle, right? So you have the manufacturer, their distributor, they may be distributing product for many manufacturers, right? It will go to the retailers, consumers, it comes back, and it's definitely a huge problem that this distributor had with us. So they have thousands of transactions going out and thousands of transactions coming back. And it was critical for this distributor because as a distributor, the margins are very, very thin, right? So any process improvement for them helps them with their bottom line too. Now, what happened, right? So they had over 5,000 returns per month, right? And that tripled during the holidays. It took months to process those returns. And as most of you know, retailers have deadlines now as well. So if you don't respond back within a X number of days, be it 60, 90, 120 days, then you're out of luck. You cannot dispute that amount, and you have to eat that. As I mentioned earlier on, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars being lost for unreconciled returns variances. You just don't have the manpower, and they didn't have the manpower to do this. However, they tried, right? So they tried to solve the problem. They added staff, they added some automation to a certain extent to make that possible. So wherever they could add some better formulas or some form of automation, that they tried. Now they heard about iNymbus, right? So and they asked, as I heard about iNymbus and about their robotics technology, and iNymbus has been using this for 3-4 years now on that side. And so they asked iNymbus to develop a proof of concept. They said, okay, we have a problem. Could you go ahead and help us through this? So they asked us to develop the robots. They chose one specific retailer to try and go for, and not only did they want to tackle the problem end to end, so they just didn't want to do the reconciliation piece. They said, let's see if your bots can actually do the full variance analysis and also upload it into the portal. So why have the bots just do the reconciliation piece of it and then somebody else manually enter it in there? So they challenged iNymbus to see if they can handle the whole return variance analysis process. Now, how long did it take, right? So several conference calls were set up where iNymbus recorded the process, right, of how the distributor was dealing with these return variances and so forth. iNymbus went away for a month and came back with a specialized returns variance processing bot, right? So this bot, or bots, I'll show you in a second, were how they were able to automate that back office return process. Now this is what the process was like before, right? So you had the product that was flowing through, from the retailer, the AR would fetch the data from the ERP system, like I mentioned earlier, pricing. They would go to the websites, they would find the logistics from their warehouse, and they would go ahead and manually do the validation between the systems to make sure this is correct. And then they would go ahead and navigate through all the different applications, do the reconciliation, and then upload it into the portal. So this was their process before. After iNymbus, it was much, much different, right? So when the product did come back, they were able to create several bots for this whole process. The first bot would fetch the data automatically from the ERP systems, have that information gathered. Like I mentioned earlier on, there is a gathering process and then there's a review process. Then the bots actually did the automated validation between the systems, right? So they knew which systems to go to. Then as they navigate through the applications, they were able to do the reconciliation. And last but not least, the bots did actually dispute that return into the vendor portal, right? So you went from this before process, very manual, back and forth, prone to data error and so forth, where now the bots are going into the system, reduce number of errors, and are able to upload that in a timely manner too. When it was over, did they lay off the staff? No, they really didn't lay off the staff. They were able to actually repurpose the staff to do other things. Not only analyze, right, the data to go back to see if there were any trends with any warehouses, any faulty product or so forth, but are able to now focus in on supply chain or reverse supply chain issues instead of having to be in the day-to-day of reconciling all of these. And they were able to also help plug the holes, right, for seasonal information that would increase. So the bots were able to not worry, the company was not able to worry about having to add additional staff where the bots could do that work. And then the staff were able to actually help with process improvement on the back end. Now, benefits of robotic process automation, right? So this has been the buzzword for 2 to 3 years now, RPA, and a lot of companies are moving towards this, right? So again, I mentioned it freed up their time, so employee morale was better. They could take time off during the holidays with their family and not worry about the volumes of work that would come back. Productivity increased with creating root cause analysis. Reliability, right? So once you have a process, it is repeated and they're able to go ahead and do that. And so there's fewer errors, which boils down to consistency. Again, this is a non-invasive technology in the sense that it's not a huge IT budget project. It actually supplements and helps your staff in really freeing up some of their time. Compliance. Now you're able to stay within the 30, 60, 90, 120 days of your retailers asking you to do that reconciliation, so you're more compliant. And now it says a low technical barrier on this side. So, you know, iNymbus does specialize in building bots for specific areas. I know today we're talking about the return variance analysis, but the technology is there. And it was easy for the staff to learn, right? So where there were any discrepancies, they're able to go ahead and resolve those. And then accuracy, I mentioned that earlier on. 10 keying if it's pulling data from your system. Again, accuracy all boils down to your system and the accuracy of your data in the system. If that data isn't correct, then the bots are just going to be pulling data from there. So that's a little bit about the benefits of robotic process automation. So this season, you know, only their bots will be exhausted, not the AR team, right? So you do have the bots working. They can work 24/7 depending upon how you would like to schedule them, whether you want to do a daily upload, weekly upload, and mentioned earlier on that you don't need to worry about the volumes that are coming in because the bots will just continue to perform more faster and faster as those return variances come in. Now, everyone talks about software as a service. I'm going to talk a little bit today about robots as a service. So again, mentioned this earlier on, robotic process automation. Now, what bots really do is they automate the business interaction by repeating a set of actions normally performed by humans, right? So when your teams do a return variance analysis, they follow specific steps and actions that they have to go through, and that needs to be repeated for every single RMA that comes through. That's what robots are doing, right? Software is combined with artificial intelligence. So as it's learning your repetitive processes, it can start to see patterns about specific return products that are coming back, or whether it's a specific warehouse that's making an error. Again, it's behind the scenes. So that's, at its basics, what robotic process automation is this automation of the repeatable processes that are concurrently performed by humans. IT trend alert, right? So, yes, it's out there. A lot of organizations are saying, yes, we're going to put RPA across all of our processes. We're going to start with, say sales. We're going to look at marketing. We're going to look at accounts payable, receivable, and see if there's some GL stuff and so forth. So there are companies that will sell you off-the-shelf RPA bots. However, you're going to have knowledgeable people who are trained in developing these bots. And I've seen companies that say, yes, we're going to go ahead and do this. And to justify the cost, again, it's a huge IT project. They spend a lot of their time gathering all the departments that really want to do this. That may take 3 months. Then they're going to go ahead and do an RFP. That may take another 3 to 6 months. And then by the time they kick it off, what do they prioritize, right? And I know accounts receivable is often at the end of the supply chain, and is often forgotten because, you know, we're looked at as a cost center. And so whatever your prioritization is always left at the bottom. It will take years and it will cost a lot of money. And often a lot of these fail or are out of budget because they don't really have that expertise of people on their staff that would help on the RPA side. Now, RPA done bottoms up, right? What I've seen best practice and what iNymbus has been able to help other companies is, you know, you take one business process, right? Such as returns process variance we're talking about today. Find the robotic specialists in the AR space, right? Go to them and they should be able to go ahead and create that bot or bots like I showed you earlier on for that specific process. And it reduces the risk of, you know, trying to create it yourself, trying to develop it yourself, and then trying to maintain it yourself. So if there are any changes on retailer portals or if there's any changes on your process, you're going to have a huge IT organization. So what my advice is, if you identify one process, pick that one process, automate it, see how it works. Prove that concept, make sure it continues to work, and there is a return on investment. After that, look at the next bot, right? Instead of trying to be part of a huge, big IT project, it's often easier to look at that. And then, you know, this is probably an easier budget to pass through than the previous slide. Now, iNymbus does level the playing field, right? So retailers are constantly sending return variances back. They're not sending sending return products to you, but there are variances that you need to go ahead and do the analysis on, right? So just as quickly as those returns are coming back, your bots can, at lightning speed, redispute those and get them uploaded into the retailer's portal. You asked what's next. It's quite super simple, right? Like I said, I've worked with iNymbus for 2 to 3 years with various companies looking at automation. What I would suggest is, you know, schedule a demo with iNymbus of the robotic process and their solutions that they have. You know, assess whether they are able to do what you ask them to do, right, on the processes, and, you know, determine if they have the ability for the bots and the integration points. Then, you know, have a look at it, size them up against any other robotic process automation companies that are out there in the AR space, because you want to make sure that you have that knowledge base there that will really, you know, help you do these processes much quicker. Now, I know your team are constantly putting out fires. Like I mentioned earlier on, this is definitely will improve morale. It will give them more job satisfaction because now they will be working on more analytical work and strategic versus having to do a lot of the tactical stuff. Now, just a final few words of advice on robotics, right? Focus on your department and your issues. Nobody else will, right? Everyone else is saying it's your problem, you fix it. However, as we all know, a lot of these problems start upstream. But again, focus on what it specifically is your problem. Hone in on one process, like I mentioned earlier on. Start with one, and then you can add as those processes get better, right? Now, don't try to solve, you know, your issues with a larger outsource RPA. Again, driven by that technology team. IT are always looking to see what's next for them, and RPA is next across there. But like I mentioned earlier, it's a bigger project, bigger budget, and a lot tougher to get through organizations. Now, there are accounts receivable packages that are out there, SAP, you know, bolt-ons and so forth. Research them to see if they really have the RPA technology that will help your back office. And last but not least, right, find a company that has done this before and they have that industry knowledge, because that is key, right? So if they already have that industry knowledge, you don't have to retrain them or you don't have to teach them on that. You just have to show them your process, and then they should be able to modify their bots to accommodate your different company needs. Now, I'm sure RVCF will send you these, but you can actually find these on the iNymbus websites, some case studies and additional information for you to do more research on that. Appreciate your time, and I'll open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you, Rohit, for all of your insights and techniques. Now I'd like us to address some of the questions we've received. The first question we have here: what type of savings have you seen from implementing robots for shipper claims?
So the companies that iNymbus have worked with, right? For shipper claims specifically, it is basically it's in terms of manpower, and it's almost incalculable, because in the sense that you do have the manpower. They were able to actually, like I said, repurpose, use them for more analytical stuff. So they were able to go back upstream and figure out what those problems were, right? So if you think about a bot can do about 1,000 claims a day versus a human, maybe your best analyst can probably do 10 or maybe 20 returns analysis a day. So the costs vary depending upon where you are in the country and what your overhead costs are as well. But there's definitely a huge amount that can be saved.
Okay. How fast could we be up and running with our own robots?
So in the case study I mentioned earlier on, it is as quick as a couple of months, right? So what iNymbus would do is look at your processes, record that, come back. Often I've seen them come back within a week or so to say, okay, here it is. Now, if they are the experts in this area, then they are able to go ahead and do that. But it can be as quick as 4 weeks. The longest I've seen them is about a couple of months.
Okay. When putting in robots for my company, how much will my IT need to be involved?
Now, that all depends, right? So we've worked with companies, for example, the distributor that I mentioned earlier on. They were able to get us the data or access to that data, and it was less than 8 hours of work from the IT organization to get that information. So it's basically access to the systems and to the data. That's all the IT involvement is needed. So it's not much. It can range from, like I said, 8 hours to true working hours, right? To 8 to 16 hours max.
Okay. Do you have any pharmaceutical customers?
I would have to go back and check with iNymbus. I'm not sure, but having said that, a widget is a widget, right? So if you're going to supply product into a supply chain, I understand with the pharmaceutical, there may be slight nuances as there is in clothes and so forth, but they do have a gamut of customers that can go through the process in the background.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you for your questions and for attending today's seminar. A link to the on-demand version of this webinar will be sent to you following our program. For those of you who have further questions about the material covered today, or whose questions were not addressed in the Q&A portion, please feel free to use the contact information provided in this presentation. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.